All right, thanks Kashad and Becca for getting the slides up there. Hey everyone, Brian Gockel here, Weather Service Office of Observations. Welcome to the Satellite Book Club seminar series. This is hard to believe, session 237. And the team looked back and reminded me, we want to remind you, this is 5 years of the Satellite Book Club seminar series. We didn't know how long this would go on when we started it during the early months of COVID. And at 5 years, we've had so many informative presenters and facilitators and participants. So thank you very much for that. We appreciate that these talks have really helped share how and where satellite data fits into the mission and forecast process in the Weather Service. It's been a real valuable resource, fostering collaboration and sharing of information among the Weather Service forecasters, NESDIS, and other users. We look forward to another 5 years of the seminars, and I can say the leveraging of this most expensive and important observation system in the NOAA portfolio, you guys have taken it to a new level. I think that was beyond the expectations of those who put these programs together 10, 20, 25 years ago. So this has really been huge. Today's presentation is navigating the operational impacts of a rapidly changing forecast, a specific case, May 8th and 9th, 2024, tornado outbreak from beginning to end. Presented by Becca Darish, Katie McGee, and Chris White from WFO Huntsville, Alabama. Our facilitator today is Chauncey Schultz, the Sioux from WFO Bismarck, North Dakota. Becky, Katie, and Chris, thank you for presenting today. We know you and your office have been very busy with a post-event surveys and so forth following the recent severe weather event in your region. We appreciate that. Even with that, you continue to put together the presentation and agreed to still come talk to us today while managing the aftermath of those storms. So thank you very much for that. Before we get underway, though, just the usual reminders, which most of you are familiar with, but we'll run through them. The session's being recorded per the OCIO Privacy Act guidelines. Attendees will not have the ability to use their microphones and webcams. The team has put a pinned message in the chat for more info. As usual, we'll be doing Q&A at the end of the main presentation, and we encourage all attendees to put questions in the chat room, and we will field them from there. If you're logged on under an alias or group account, please sign in with your full name, or at least specify your full name when you're asking a question in the chat. We're always looking for future presenters. We welcome you, and please contact the TowerS team if you're interested. And there goes a form that Emily just dropped in the chat. Thank you, Emily. Training team can help create training materials that may be unavailable or you might not be able to locate. Please contact Ross Van Til for information on that. Thanks to him, the OCLO, Geo and Leo programs, Chris, our facilitator, and the presenters today. And we want to give you a little bit about their background before we turn the mic over and jump into their seminar. First of all, we have Becca, Katie, and Chris. First of all, Becca Darish has been a meteorologist at NWS Huntsville for almost 2 years. And prior to that, she worked at Weather Service Tallahassee as a pathways intern while obtaining her degree in meteorology from Florida State University. Over the last few years, Becca has fallen in love with the diverse and challenging weather that is found in the Southeast U.S. and has already worked through several hurricanes, winter storms, floods, and even a tornado outbreak. Katie McGee has been the Sioux Science Operations Officer at Huntsville for over 3 years. Prior to that, she was a forecaster both at Huntsville and Houston Weather Service offices, as well as a pathways intern at the Meteorological Development Laboratory here in Weather Service. Katie has her BS in meteorology from NC State, North Carolina State, and her MS in Earth Sciences from UNC Charlotte. She also serves as adjunct faculty at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And then rounding out today's dream team trifecta of presenters, we've got Chris White, has been with the Applications Integration Meteorologist at NWS Huntsville and NASA Sports since September 2011. He's been integrated in the satellite community, many communities, but the satellite community especially, and assisted in the early transition and training efforts with the GOES-R and JPSS proving grounds and associated data sets and projects. He has also facilitated the transition of NASA's sport core products, such as the Land Information System, and more recently, AI projects such as the Streamflow AI and Lightning AI. As we pass the mic over to the presenter, we welcome them to the book club, all three, Becca, Katie, and Chris. And in Chris's case, welcome back to the book club as a second or third time presenter. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will be driving most of the presentation today, but Katie and Chris are both also here and played a big role in the creation of this presentation, the utilization of all the tools and tips that we have in this presentation, and just being here to help out with any questions that come up. But as alluded to, we will be talking about the May 8th and 9th tornado outbreak. I suspect that these dates resonate with a lot of people. I know there was severe weather across large portions of the country, both before, during the 8th and 9th, and then after this as well. So specifically, we are going to be focusing on our CWA and what that brought for us. This is just a peek at some of the weather that was going on that day. We had 2 rounds of severe weather. The first on the left here being a round of evening supercells. So you can see there we've got supercells kind of scattered across the area. Almost every single one of those turned tornadic at some point. So that was from about 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then after that, we had a QLCS come through, and that was a tornadic line of storms from about 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. With the first round of supercells, they produced 11 tornadoes from EF0 to EF3. And then with the overnight QLCS, we got 9 tornadoes from EF0 to EF1. So altogether, in the span of about 12 hours, give or take, we had 20 tornadoes across the area. I find that pretty interesting. We only have 14 counties, so we were a little outnumbered there. What we're going to start off with is we're going to go back to before the event started, how we started messaging this event, what we were looking for. Obviously, we are looking at model data, all of this, all the way out beyond the 7-day period, trying to get a hold of what might be coming in the week ahead. So as we started to message this, the thing that we really grabbed onto was the overnight QLCS. That was what was being persistently shown in the models and what we were really grabbing onto and beginning to message. So again, this event happened during the evening and overnight hours for the 8th and 9th. So starting earlier in the week, but we chose to pick up the presentation on May 2nd. We were beginning to discuss it in our AFD. And again, that's mostly highlighting, it's cutting off a little bit of the presentation, but that's okay. What we're seeing in the model. So the AFD, again, that's used for the more scientific analysis. We're really able to dig into the different parameters and whatnot. And again, at this point, we're really focusing on the QLCS. That is what's being consistently shown in the models. How we message this externally for our partners, so that's the media, emergency managers, public works, we use our SITREP, which is also known as a situation report. And you can see we have a sample slide from our SITREP here down at the bottom. Tuesday and Wednesday, those are the days we are focusing on. So medium chance of showers and storms, some strong to severe. And then Wednesday night to Thursday morning, high chance of showers and storms, some strong storms possible. So as we start to see the potential for this, we're noting that there's some stronger storms possible and beginning to message that to our partners. Externally to the public, we usually rely pretty heavily on social media. That's where we get most of our public interaction. So for any severe threat, we have our canned severe graphics, and we begin to message the threat. So we include the SBC outlook, we include the timing, location, and then the thrust at the top. We have confidence with this. So we had medium confidence for all of our hazards that we were looking at. And this is, again, mostly for the QLCS. That's what we had the highest confidence in. So you'll see in our timing, we have Wednesday after midnight into Thursday morning. So this graphic is meant to communicate the threat for the overnight QLCS. That's really what we were focusing on and what we are expecting to be the main event. Where things get interesting is May 7th, the day before. we start to notice in the cams that they are inconsistently showing a round of evening supercells firing up basically on top of us. And when I say inconsistently, some models were showing it, some models were not. It was shown in one run and not shown in the next run. So it was incredibly inconsistent. You can see that May 7th for our midnight shift from Tuesday to Wednesday, we begin to discuss this in our AFD. A few models suggest that isolated warm sector thunderstorms, likely supercellular, may develop to the southwest late Wednesday afternoon, shift northeastward Wednesday evening. As we begin to see this threat, the question that's beginning to arise is, at what level of confidence do we start messaging this externally? Speaking on like the mesoscale aspects, what we were incredibly uncertain of is if there would be a forcing mechanism to trigger these storms. Which again leads to the question, what level of confidence do we begin to message this externally? With a high run event, the QLCS, and even if we don't message it, a lot of times they're getting, the public specifically is getting information from other sources, whether it be broadcast media, like YouTube meteorologists, just Twitter in general. We had a lot of people calling and asking about these storms. And specifically in our area, I'm sure other areas can resonate with this for whatever the biggest event in your area is. Whenever we have tornadoes, it brings back a lot of trauma from April 27th, specifically if we have like the potential for big supercells and tornado outbreaks. People are always calling, trying to compare it to April 27th. So that was another challenge. We already had people, even if we weren't messaging it externally, they were getting the information from other sources and we're already very worried about this. So one thing that we started, so this is again, this is May 7th, and we sent this out. This was Tuesday afternoon for our briefing, our sit rep that we gave to our partners. What we were looking at is 3 potential rounds of severe weather. So we like to include this kind of forecast details, what we're watching, to kind of give an ability to talk through all the different possibilities. Because as we all know, weather is not binary. It does not follow one specific formula. So there are cases where it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be something entirely different. So here we're highlighting the potential for 3 rounds of severe weather. One of them being, we actually had severe weather the Wednesday before as well. We were in a marginal risk and had some severe storms with that. And then looking for Wednesday and then Wednesday night. We highlight the watching slide into Thursday morning where storms are developing to our northwest to determine drive in. So we are seeing this signal in the models, kind of slowly working it into our scientific area and the AFD and whatnot, and having a bunch of discussions internally. How do we best message this? Eventually, between the 2nd to the 7th, and then on May 8th, we did decide to make what we are deeming the big switch. From May 2nd to 7th, we are externally messaging overnight QLCS. That is the main threat. That is the time frame that you should be most concerned. On probably the 7th, afternoon of the 7th, and then during the day on May 8th, that is when we made the transition and began to externally message to our partners and the public about the supercell threat. So low confidence scenario, we mentioned it briefly earlier, probably verbally in our briefings. We had a few lines in our AFDs talking about the low confidence. Well, as we go from May 7th to May 8th, at about that 24-hour period, probably from like midday on the 7th to midday on the 8th, the models were continuing to inconsistently show this threat. So it kind of led us to believe that this is a real possibility. However, we still do have very low confidence in it developing. Ultimately, what we decided, and we're going to go through some of the mesoscale that led to this decision, is that it was a high enough risk that we needed to message the threat no matter how low confidence that we had. And to get, yeah, Katie brings up a good point. So beginning, like, you know, before May 7th and before very low confidence. As we got the 7th and the 8th, consistently represented in the model, we're starting to have higher confidence that this could develop. So she brings up a good point. Confidence was increasing as we went through that day. And we're going to look through some of the things that led us to our confidence increasing. So this is the sounding from, I know it says University of Alabama, Huntsville. This one's actually from Nashville. So let me make sure that I have the right time. So this is the 18C sounding on the 8th. So like our midday sounding. And this is when we were trying to get all the information possible because we are putting together our slides for our partners. We are going to give the briefing. So we are, I know the numbers are pretty hard to see here. I'll try and read some off. We are not capped at all. We have a ton of cape and a decent amount of shear. The shear hadn't fully arrived yet, but you can see our photograph looks favorable there as well. So we're looking at this when and we are surface-based. Everything is there in the environment. Should things erupt, supercells are entirely possible. These are our UAH soundings that we were able to obtain. We are very fortunate here. We are not an upper air office. However, being located or co-located with the University of Alabama Huntsville Meteorology Department, we are often able to obtain special soundings from UAH. And this showed a similar environment here. And this one's completely local. So I'm reading here, we're barely capped. We have a ton of cape. And again, the photograph is favorable. And at this point, we're still waiting a little bit for the more favorable shear. And then as we go into the evening, this is kind of what we ended up with. So all of our mesoscale parameters are setting us up into a very volatile environment. And the uncertainty there is if we have forcing mechanism. You can see the 0C. Let's see.
We'd have to squint to read it, Jonathan.
Yeah,
we can come talk to you.
It's about an increase of 1,000. So from 18C, we were like 1,800, and for the UAH soundings, we're at about like 2,800. So it is a pretty significant increase. That's just one method that we were looking at. Another, we have our surface analysis. So we were able to see the surface trough axis, which is, you can see I think you can see my mouse. This brown one right here. And the lingering differential heating boundary. I know that they're very similar colors, but the more vertical one here. Those are boundaries that we are looking at. These could be triggering factors for our storms. Knowing that we have a supportive environment, we might have a potential forcing mechanism. How do we message this? That is what we are running into. Well, we ended up messaging, and we had a bunch of internal dialogue here. This slide alone probably took us 45 minutes maybe of debating. Do we show like specific cams to show the threat? Do we want to just try and type it out and message it verbally? How do we show this? What we ended up doing is taking current radar image, and since it was a PDF, we couldn't have like a loop or anything, so we just grabbed a screen capture and highlighted the threats. So our red is this is our overnight QLCS. This is the one we've been messaging for about a week now. This is where we have high confidence. Then we have our blue and our pink. This is where we are trying to message our lower confidence, about medium confidence, but high risk threats for supercells. So this is how we ended up messaging it. And this was pivoting because we were now focusing on, okay, we do still have the overnight QLCS. However, we may have significant impacts before this. We also used one of our favorite slides, our what we're watching slide. And this is highlighting the 3 potential rounds, and again, pairs well with that previous slide. So I'll start at the bottom, actually. This is, again, what we are messaging from the get-go. We've been messaging this for a week, the overnight QLCS. And we like to do the most likely. This maintains intensity, brings severe winds through the entire area. And then we include what we're looking at. So there was the potential, if we do have supercells, will this erode the environment enough where the QLCS weakens as it moves through our area? That if we got supercells, that was a potential. And then we have this evening, line of storms over Tennessee pushes southward. We're looking to see if these maintain intensity and if they do even enter our area. And then finally, this afternoon into the evening, supercells develop clusters and move in. Still monitoring if they form at all. That is what the question was. Very quickly after presenting this to our partners, I believe this was about 1:30, we entered into watch coordination with SBC. So, okay, I guess it was about 2 hours. So briefing with our partner ends around 2. We finish out, send out all of our products for the AFD, the sit rep to our partners, the social media post. At about 3:48 p.m., we enter watch coordination. So again, our highest confidence is in the overnight. This is about 10 hours out from the overnight QLCS. So you can see how that was a big switch if we're entering a tornado watch from people a day before expecting the threat to be overnight. So we were really trying to ramp up our messaging rapidly here.
And so I'll add some color here. I remember entering this watch coordination, we were having a lot of conversations internally. There were 4 of us in the office for this. So as you see what's happening, you saw that there were 4 people managing all those supercells. It was a big question. SBC basically said, we can put you in a watch now, or you're going to need to wait a couple hours because there's a lot going on today. And so we looked at each other and we'd rather have lead time than not. So as you look at these Slack messages, especially Becca, she was in the agency 1 year at this point, by the way, when writing all of this. So like huge kudos to Becca for that level of analysis. We issued the watch and then we sat and nothing was happening. And I remember us thinking like, we might've done goofed up. So that's just kind of mentally where we are at this point between about 4 p.m., 3:30, 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. So that's my little injection there.
Yes, that is a very good point. We were all kind of sitting there twiddling our thumbs, and people are calling, people are messaging in Slack. What you don't see in the Slack messages is people asking, well, what's going to happen? Where are they now? Why haven't they fired up yet? So that is kind of us trying to control the narrative there of it's still possible just because you don't see anything yet. That this is how these sort of storms work. There is nothing, and then there is everything. And that is almost exactly what happened. Before we get to what happened, for our for the public, we're still communicating our highest confidence being the overnight QLCS. However, we do include our low confidence in an afternoon round of supercells. And then we are obviously posting about the tornado watch being issued and making sure that people realize that the tornado watch that is issued right now is for a separate threat. We are still anticipating a secondary round of severe weather. So that was an additional challenge, making sure that people knew that even though we have the potential for severe weather right now, we still have an additional threat. And maintaining the message to the public. This is about the time frame. There were storms going on all day. So I know Nashville had a bunch of tornado warnings. They did not impact our area, but through the entire day, there was tornado warnings in Nashville's area. And for us, this is about 7:20 p.m. This is our radar imagery. You can see we have 1 severe storm warning. The tornado warnings and the severes that you see up in the north, those are not in our area. This is about the time frame where people are kind of like, okay, what's going on? We've been sitting in this watch for almost 4 hours and we haven't got much. However, as most of us probably can see, we have storms developing very quickly. Did they go tornadic? So this is 7:20 and this is 8:20. It is a little bit hard to see here, but I think at this point, 2, 3, 5 maybe supercells in our area right now. So it kind of went from nothing to everything all at once, 0 to 100 all at once. And our pivot in the messaging and being able to issue that watch, give lots of lead time, had we not done that, we would have had absolutely no time to communicate this threat since it literally went 0 to 100 in about 45 minutes. And again, as he mentioned, there was 4 of us here at this time. Having the highest confidence in the overnight severe event, we staffed up for the overnight event. We did not staff up for the potential for evening supercells. So 4 of us doing warnings, communications, social media, messaging.
Our phones were down.
Our phones were also down. It was a crazy day. So what happened? As I mentioned earlier, we had 20 tornadoes, we had 11 from the evening round, and we had 9 from the overnight round. Now, the question is, how do you find all these tracks? It is quite hard to see here, but we will get into the details here in a moment. We had supercells that tracked over the same area. We had supercells that cross-tracked. We had tracks that crossed from the supercells and the overnight QLCS. It was a hot mess. As an example of this, here is some radar imagery from our radar. And you can see we have 2 supercells tracking over the exact same location, about an hour apart. So how do we go about finding the survey? How do we do an accurate survey when we might have damage that goes over the same tracks? That is a question that we were asking ourselves for several weeks. And I would like to believe that we did find some viable solutions. And this is where we're going to get into the satellite part, the satellite book club. So now you have a good idea of what happened. We're going to get into how we found this out. So most people, I believe, are familiar with the DAT. This is the Digital Assessment Toolkit, where we go out and survey. For those who are not familiar with it, we physically drive out to the points, take pictures of the damage, categorize it. All of these little green and blue points here are damage points that we found. You can see, well, you probably can't see because it's a little too small, but there's a bunch of overlapping points, especially here in Northeast Alabama. There's a whole bunch of points over there. As we zoom in here, this is a zoom into the Huntsville track. And right across the middle here is a mountain. That also created some challenges. So not only do we have overlapping tracks, we also have incredibly rough terrain that we cannot go through. There is not roads, there's not houses, there is nothing back there that we can go through. And a lot of it is private property too. We can't even go out there and like walk through the woods if we wanted to. So how do we survey that? And another point that we were struggling with is you need a point with 2 miles. That's the length you have. You have to have a point within 2 miles of the last one to continue it as the same tornado. That is a struggle that we had. So with all of these struggles, the terrain, the overlapping tornadoes, making sure that we had points within 2 miles of each other. This is Katie and our WCM Kate trying to sort it out. It was a hot mess here on the first few days. Maybe the first day, we got a little bit better. So how did we go about tracking all of this and finding all of the tornado tracks? Well, we had a lot of help. We used drone imagery from UAH. I know that one helped in the Madison and Huntsville tornadoes. We used Worldview 3 imagery, and we used NDVI differencing imagery. For the drones, this is kind of just an overview of where we got drone imagery. So this is like southeast Huntsville. And we'll zoom in here. This was an interesting area because this is a cemetery. And we could not get in here at the time, but we could see the trees down. So the drones, you have something to add? No? Okay. The drones were able to capture that, and we were able to see the trees down and where they were down, what direction they were facing. What the drones were also able to capture for us is where the damage was concentrated. So in this red swath here, this is a narrower swath of continuous damage. And then in the broader circle here, we have a broader area of damage. This helped us narrow in on the exact track of the tornado and then what might have been from straight line winds, the downdraft, the forward flank from the supercell. Some more examples that we have are trees down that we were able to find from drones. So these are a little bit harder to see, not zoomed in, but the red we have here, we have trees down, and the blue here, we are also able to find trees down here. Where?
So that's when we separated the 2 tracks out. Because what happened was, if we go back here, you see all of these damage points. And so you know we had those 2 supercells over the exact same point. How do you determine where these damage points happened with which of those 2 supercells? So I know Becca and I were on this survey, and the only thing we could do was just take pictures of the damage and think, we'll figure it out later with the radar imagery. Well, then we go back and we look at the radar imagery, and those hook echoes both passed over this area. So what the heck do you do with that? There were TDSs with both of them. So that's where the drone imagery, which this is as high res as it is. You zoom in, you can see like leaves on trees. It is beautiful. You can see this northern continuous swath, and then to the south, we started seeing some more continuous areas. So that's how we were finally able to separate out the two tracks. We would not have been able to do that without this drone imagery. So that is ultimately what really helped us understand that, okay, we're looking at two separate things, and we have greater confidence we can actually differentiate the two. Now, which goes with which supercell, that was a different challenge, but that's what caught us here. Yeah.
As we move on from the more urban areas, again, that challenge that we were facing was damage points not present within 2 miles of another. They have to be a new tornado. If they're not within 2 miles, they have to be a new tornado. We had the radar imagery showing the supercell, the velocity couplet, and the debris tracking over the mountain. It's called Montesano here. However, we could not get back there. So here is what we were struggling with. We have our points here before the mountain, and we have our points here after the mountain. Those are beyond 2 miles, just barely, but they had to be entered as separate tornadoes. So how do we go about finding this? This is where worldview imagery comes in. And we were able to find more trees down. So a better example that we have here, so there's an example between the drone imagery and the worldview imagery. This is what we were able to find using the worldview imagery. So you can see we have a little bit of the swath of trees down here that we were able to find with the worldview imagery. And this is what allowed us to be able to connect those tracks over the mountain. Since you can see this is a pretty densely populated area of trees, there's no way we could get back there, and there's nothing back there, no houses, no infrastructure or anything.
It was like the world's worst game of Where's Waldo, trying to find these trees down, zooming in. I remember sitting down with Chris and Kate and everybody, panning across the area, trying to find these swaths of trees down. It's a challenge, anyone who's gone through it.
So we were able to connect those dots over the mountain. Another tool that we were able to use was the NDVI differencing imagery. So this is the normalized difference vegetation index, basically where it's darker, that means there's a difference in vegetation. A lot of these big dark swaths are areas like fields where they might be farming or plowing or something like that. However, these lighter dark swaths that you can see kind of along this track, that allowed us to separate the two tracks as well. You can see we have one area of darker vegetation difference here along the north, and we were able to find a second area of darker vegetation difference on the southern track. This was another tool that we used to separate the difference in the two.
And tweak the track. So go back and forth between these next two slides a couple times.
So I guess this first one here, this is our initial tornado track. With the vegetation difference, we were able to tweak the track. So as I pointed out, those vegetation differences, you can see that we were able to pull the tracks closer, especially the southern one, to the vegetation difference. So that helped us have a more accurate track length. There's more though. Out here, I mentioned we have a bunch of points out in Jackson County, and you can see this is kind of a hot mess. We kind of have some linear points, but then as we get closer to the county line, this is a hot mess. So how did we track this? We were able to use all of those previous tools, the vegetation difference, the worldview, and drones, and we were able to find 3 different tracks here. So you can see it aligns much better. We have one track that goes north to south from the overnight QLCS. We have a second track that goes from Jackson County to DeKalb County for the first supercell that tracked through this area. And then this was another case where we had double supercells. So we had dueling supercells. One passed through about an hour before the other in a very similar area. This third one down further south is the second supercell that passed through the area. So there was a lot going on with this event, but using those tools, we were able to more effectively assign the tracks. And I like to think we use a lot of scientific integrity here. It would have been very easy to kind of group it together and make the track fit the points that we had. However, we had the radar imagery supporting separate tracks. So we really dove into the details to make sure that we were assigning the correct times in supercells and QLCS to the correct damage. So from the before the event, during the event, after the event, final takeaways for the during the event, staff more than 4 people for our tornado outbreak. That's my advice. But for the messaging portion before the event, tell people what you know when you know it. So continue to lean on observational data and our cams to really dive into that mesoscale analysis. Practice with operational meteorologists for how to phrase and translate mesoscale analysis into something you can communicate with the partners, with the public, to take out that complex jargon. And then probabilistic messaging helps. You saw that we included our confidence in all of this to help us be able to message it without going too all in on a lower confidence threat. For the surveys, this is another thing that I didn't really touch on much. A lot of the satellite data and the drone data we got not necessarily in a timely manner with the event. So some of the drone data we got right away, but the satellite data we had to request. So what the question that we were running into is how far back is too far back to make adjustments? Is it, a couple weeks, a couple days, a couple months, or as we're getting more and more advanced, a year, 5 years, 10 years? I don't have a good answer to that, but it is something interesting to contemplate as we become more scientifically advanced and able to access these more remote areas better. So it definitely is an important balance between the timeliness of getting the survey information out and available to the public, but also making sure that it is as correct as we can get it. We want to maintain our scientific integrity, and while it's probably not possible to get it exactly perfect every time, it is important that we do try. So the post-storm surveying, it's an important science, but we have to try to get it right as best as we can. So that wraps up more of the presentation stuff. There was a lot of people that put effort into this. So Katie and Chris are here today. Kate helped obviously with a lot of the storm surveys and whatnot. And then from the NASA side, for a lot of the satellite imagery that we were getting, Jordan Bell and Alexander Melicom, they also helped a lot. So that wraps up our presentation on the formal side, but we are very interested in the discussion and any questions that anyone might have, especially as we find ourselves kind of navigating a similar scenario. We had supercells on Tuesday that tracked over the same locations. Right now, we're trying to navigate tracks where we have points everywhere that we might have multiple tracks that overlap each other. So we are going to be using these tools and best practices in real time now to sort out all of the damage that we had on Tuesday.
Thank you so much, Becca. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Becca, Katie, and Chris. Really excellent. No doubt a challenging event. I think that you nailed it on the head when you said that you really maintain scientific integrity with the tracks as well. So we encourage everyone to stay on, especially folks from field forecast officers and forecast offices and regional headquarters. Stay on for that discussion, question and answers that we're going to be having here. We would also like to encourage everyone to change your meeting layout tile to tiled and select hide tiles without video, as you can see on the screen as we go through the questions and answers. We'll have a feedback form that's going to be placed in the chat here in a moment as well, if you have any feedback on this Satellite Book Club session. And then we actually would love for you to join us again a week from today, next Thursday, May 29th. Brian Lasorsa, the Science and Operations Officer from the Sterling, Virginia office, is going to be discussing a meteorological study of the June 5th, 2024 outbreak at Eastern Virginia, Northern Virginia, and Maryland. We also would remind folks that if you have any questions that relate to the Satellite Book Club, or if you need assistance with any configuration of satellite products, to please get in touch with the Towers S team, Kashad Bowman and Emily Maddox. You see their contact information there, and also you can find them on the Towers S Slack channel. So with that, let's dive right into some discussion. If anybody has any questions or any topics you'd like to bring up with our presenters today, please place them in the chat room. And as folks are kind of thinking about some of the questions that they may have for all of you, I'll throw one out at you. And I had this prepared ahead of time, or we had this prepared ahead of time to ask, were there other events that you've had that had maybe similarly had these really rapid ramp up, in events and challenges that maybe came with it? I think you alluded to one that you maybe just had, but we'll touch on it and throw that one at you to start with anyway, Becca.
Unfortunately, I don't think I can speak on this event too much. I came in cold and worked the event, so I was not here for the forecasting period of it.
Yeah, I think When we discussed having this question, we were looking back and thinking about some other QLCSs we had in the cool season, maybe, some events we had one or two. And then Mother Nature was like, you know what, you need a better example. Here's 1-2 days before. So, I mean, yeah, we worked Tuesday night. We went out surveying yesterday. We're here presenting today. So I think very much most recently, exactly like Becca said, we've had other events where NDVI has helped us extend some tracks, add some tracks. I think even as far back, we started getting questions about some of the official tracks for April 27th and starting to reinvestigate some of those. Do some of the larger tracks really need to be broken up into two? Do some of the multiple tracks need to be joined? So that's part of the philosophical question. How far back is too far back? We want to preserve the scientific integrity and balancing that with the workload. It's just, this could be a full-time job for a fleet of people. Yeah, I don't know, your experiences are far more in depth.
Well, yeah, just as far as the use of the imagery for these sorts of purposes, this goes back over a decade, but that was with some older instruments, and the tornado tracks tend to be relatively large for you to be able to see them. This is with the MODIS instrument. And so, you needed tracks that were, several hundred yards, a mile wide or so to really be able to see that in the imagery very well. But as far as, actually using the imagery specifically to get DODs and DIs and that sort of thing, just going in this imagery path, this goes back about 6 years, I think, was one of the first times we may have done this with a storm in our area, where we had the 30-centimeter resolution worldview imagery, and we're able to make out what type of tree was it, what happened to it, was it snapped or was it uprooted, and that sort of thing. And that's largely, the use of these data for this sort of purpose. It's looking at types of trees and tree falls, but that's where we can't see, it's where we don't have good road networks, and those are rural areas. So that makes the most sense for the application. But otherwise, we can see damage to buildings to some extent. We can see extent of roof damage and this sort of thing, and that's also with DOD and DI. But you really need more details on the ground to be able to make good and probably proper assessments of the damage construction standards and that kind of thing.
No, thank you very much for sharing. I that resonates with me about how far back do you go? We actually were informed, WDTD, when they were working on some stuff, found a track in our area from last summer that we didn't have in our records. And we had to, it was sort of the first sort of segue that we had into thinking about some of those questions. And that one's only 6 months. It's not 15 years in the past. I guess one of my questions then maybe as a segue to that would be, for some offices that maybe are just starting to sort of scratch the surface and using some of this imagery, say even the NDVI, or just this general kind of concept, would you have any, suggestions, tips, or best practices for some offices that are maybe trying to wrestle this and get their arms around this a little bit?
Go to the eye doctor, check your prescription. You're gonna be staring at that screen, like looking right at it. But I think practicing, looking at some recent events, maybe sitting down, I'm sure Chris and I, once we get through this most recent event, are more than happy to talk to anybody about it. We're very fortunate here in Huntsville to quite literally have these NASA folks down the hall, so we can go ask them and they can coach us through it. But for other offices, I think, leaning on that network, and we can help make those connections.
Yeah, I will say that there is a new, I think it's an established workflow, and there is documentation put together by some other people out there in the field who are also rapidly becoming experts in this sort of a data analysis. And, I'll give a shout out to folks like Tyler Stanfield down in Slidell, Michael Newgrange at Mobile, and Jeremy Buckles at Morris County. I may be missing some folks who actually done a lot of work recently putting together these sorts of workflow documents together about how do we go about doing this process? How do you actually order the imagery? How do you analyze it, this sort of thing? I can say that very recently, interestingly, we had 2 back-to-back events with tornadoes across the same areas, and one in February and one in March. And then we got the high-resolution imagery in after the second event. Well, we weren't sure which event was it. Was it the February event or the March event? But then we had NDVI differencing imagery for both events, and we were able to use that imagery to tell us, oh no, the damage here was very likely for the February event. So that's another application with those kinds of data.
No, appreciate you sharing. That definitely helps. And I'm glad to know that it's not just me when I'm staring at these things, Katie, that I'm just not quite sure. We did have one question come in from the chat too, about the partner messaging. Just asking if you could kind of discuss a little bit with some detail who the various partners are when you're talking about the partners that you're reaching and in the head of these events or during the events, and maybe what some of their specific information needs are, or the actions even that they're going to take as they go through the event.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different partners. Usually when we do our webinars, especially for a higher end event like this, we can have like 150, 180 different people on the call, and they are all coming from different places. So the main ones, emergency managers, and they are planning mostly for the post-event stuff. They want to know when it's going to happen, how bad it's going to be, what they need to have prepared for their county. The media is another big partner. They are trying to also message this threat. So they kind of want to know all the details so they can message it the best. And then beyond that, that's where it can get a little more scattered and specific to your area. For us, we have a lot of school officials. That's probably pretty common. Another common one, school officials, they want to know the exact times and the exact threats. Like if they've asked us before, like, what is the highest wind speed that will happen on this road at this time? Like, I have a school bus that drives this route. I need to know if they can go or not. So like that is the information they want to know. We usually can't give it to them, but that's what they want to know. And then we have Browns Ferry people for a nuclear power plant. We have dams that are throughout the area, Red Cross, a bunch of different, can you think of any other bigger ones that I'm missing?
Sure. So we have Department of Transportation, utility companies as well, going out and doing recovery afterwards, clearing out trees, public works, things like that. So pretty much any way a storm could negatively impact some entity, they're probably on this. I think the big difference separating this out is federal, local, state government entities versus private sector. That's kind of where we have to draw the line with the weather service. Is we can't have, here locally in Huntsville, we have barren weather, literally down the street as well. So, they can't necessarily come on our briefings. We can't help them make decisions, but they, of course, have access to all of our information. So that's kind of where the barrier is there in terms of who's our core partner.
And then as far as specific needs for actions and what actions they're going to take, for a lot of people, it's planning purposes, especially for like our emergency managers, utility. Like, is it going to be a wind event and we're going to have power out everywhere and we need utility? That's a really big one. For schools, they're probably one of our other most frequent callers, and they want the information. It's timing and threats. They want to know if this threat is going to be during the school day. Is it going to be during when buses are out, even after the school day ends, especially in May for this event during a weekday? There is sports going on everywhere. One of our forecasters was at a baseball game that was going on during the outbreak with the tornado coming towards them. So they want to know everything about time and threats so that they can cancel it in a timely manner. And that's probably pretty similar for most offices with schools. They want to know if for snow days, for hurricanes, for big severe events. Here in the South, we will cancel school for severe events. That was not the case where I grew up in Michigan. Here, it very much is. So for the schools specifically, they want to know so they can make those decisions to let out early, to cancel school, if they need to cancel after school activities. So hopefully that gave some insight for the decision-making processes and action items that our partners take.
Yeah, a lot of decisions being made, no doubt, and a lot of actions from them, which is probably harder when forecast confidence isn't there. And I think we've got time to answer Ben's question from the chat about, are there any forecast confidence thresholds that you use to maybe ramp up with extra staffing? I'm guessing more than 4 is probably what you hope for, but we've all been there. So any thoughts on that?
I am not aware of any like hard set thresholds specifically. I don't know if you have any.
So I think a big thing in terms of forecast confidence, it's going to be a lot of duration of the event, intensity of the event, how widespread is this going to be? Is it going to be pulse summertime severe where you may have 1 or 2 severes? It's going to be from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. You can probably get by with 2 or 3 people. Is it going to be like for part of our all hands debriefing for this event? We went through, if we knew exactly what was going to happen, how many people would we want in here? It'd probably be closer to 12. So when we're staring down the barrel of an event coming our way, I think when it comes to planning for staffing, you start with what roles do you want, and then that'll help elucidate how many people do you want, and then trying to make sure that you're not overburdening people. We typically try and make sure nobody works over 12 hours at a time, and that is like the high end extreme. Sometimes it happens. I think we worked 13 on May 8th, and I would have been, it happens. But, the more we can plan for things, the better. And ultimately, we're just becoming, and we have been, the customers of our own forecast there. So that's just a big part of it. I think originally we weren't even planning to have 4 in the evening. That was when we were like, oh, we could have like 1 or 2 supercells.
We were not supposed to be there. We were supposed to leave, and then probably at like 5 or 6 p.m. And then the supercells went up, and we stayed.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of the planning behind it is.
No, thank you. And then certainly lots of work afterwards, as you all outlined, and it's really neat to see how the satellite data really came together for that. And this has been a great presentation, a great discussion. I'm sure there's lots of more questions out there that we could probably talk about for an hour, but I'll turn it back over to Brian and to kind of wrap us up and bring us home. And yeah, thank you all very much. Great discussion.
Thank you, Chauncey. Wonderful talking to you always.
Okay, thanks all very much. I had a brief screen freeze there, so hopefully we'll shut this down systematically. But Chauncey, thanks so much for your facilitation, and to the team at Huntsville, Becca, Katie, and Chris. We really appreciate you walking us through this complex case, how you use the data, and act frankly how you do the job in engaging with partners. Hey, listen, everyone, see you next Thursday. As Chauncey said, a week from today, Brian LaSource's case study on the June 5th, 2024 outbreak in Northern Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland. Looking forward to that. Thanks, everyone, for your participation, and we'll wrap up today's call here.